You see people of all creeds writing a book. Like, everyone thinks that they can be a writer, but not everyone is an author. Just a heads up, these words and opinions are mine and my own, much like Gollum and the One Ring. We'll attempt to keep most of this as spoiler-free as possible, but if you have any questions about the material in this podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out to doublemoonletters@gmail.com. Thank you, enjoy the podcast.
Let's go.
Hello everyone, welcome to Letters from a Double Moon, Episode 1, The Curious Case of the Vanished Violet. My name is Nahima, and thank you for your presence here tonight. Okay, now that formalities are out of the way, I just want to say I'm so chuffed, I'm so excited. This is Episode 1, Series 1. I don't even know if this will be a series, but it is Episode 1. The very first in this lovely bracket, we'll say. So a little bit about me. I guess I'm wanting to do a podcast like this because at the moment I'm a publisher by trade, and I'm definitely looking to expand my reading, read books that challenge me, read my favorites, and bring you along for the ride. But aside from that, I like tea and cozy crafts like crochet, and I like to play Nintendo Switch, but just the indie games. I love niche perfume, so I like to hoard that a little bit. My favorite brands are Juliet Has a Gun and BDK. I love traditional Japanese music, and I appreciate it a lot whenever I can. I used to play quite a bit the koto, but that's fallen to the wayside in recent times, unfortunately. And I also love to manifest only good things for bees. Because as we all know, bees are what makes this big old world turn round, and as I always say, we need to care for the little bees of all creeds. Honestly, it's a good thing. So I've had about 10 years experience as a communicator in the space where I am at. I did theatre reviews, theatre critiquing, reporting in the creative space, bit of journalism. And yeah, in recent times, I'm a freelance publisher, so I love to do this work. I do appraisals, I do assessments, I do publishing, like project management, to get, authors where they want to be with their book. And I bloody love it. It's very rewarding, and I love the interactions I get day to day with authors. And even if it's, a bit of drama happening or a little bit of issues happening with the work, like errors or something, we can always fix it. So I love that. It's always fixable. But can you guess where the podcast name comes from? I have decided to put a little Easter egg in this one, and we've come up with a name that relates to one of my fave books by one of my absolute favorite authors, and I won't say much more than that. Okay, enough chit chat. What are we going to talk about today? So today's topic is not the first book that I would actually pick from my bookshelf. Certainly not a book that I remember half the time, but whenever I do remember it, I remember it fondly because it is tender. It's a tender work, it's bizarre, and it transports the reader to lonely places, a bit like Laika, traveling through space in the space shuttle, Laika the dog. And oh my god, can we just say she was the cutest, goodest girl. I know her story is very sad. I read a little bit of it the other day thinking, oh, this is going to be great. But no, I was heartbroken, my heart tore in two just thinking about that poor dog. Absolutely terrified, being chuffed off to space. And then actually she just died immediately, not even before orbit started. So very sad story was like his, but it's good that we remember it and we kind of know that the animal cruelty, protests and all that kind of mean something, and they mean a lot. So it's great that animal cruelty is against a good fight. But yeah, so basically I could talk about the works of the author that I'd love to talk about today at a later time, like a bit more of the stuff that I actually really love. But this book today that we're going to talk about is Sputnik, Sweetheart. Let's hook the book for you, shall we? So Sputnik, Sweetheart is written by Haruki Murakami, or, you know, traditionally you would say Murakami Haruki, seeing as he is Japanese. I'm looking at the back of the book now, just the blurb, kind of trying to figure out how to surmise this book for you all. One of the reviews says, Sputnik, Sweetheart has touched me deeper and pushed me further than anything I've read in a long time. That was Julie Myerson for The Guardian. Now, basically, the story goes something like this. So this book by Haruki Murakami was translated to English by Philip Gabriel around 2001, I think it came out. After being published initially, I think it was, let me check the imprint page, 1999. And basically, the story goes something like this. Sumire, which means violet in Japanese, so like the flower, the little purple flower. She's a 22-year-old kind of beatnik wannabe. She wants to be a writer. She loves Kerouac, Jacques Kerouac. She loves dressing in an oversized second-hand coat with big boots, and always has messy hair, always is a bit of a shambles, a bit of a hot mess. She goes to her cousin's wedding and she meets Miyu, who is an older, successful businesswoman. They sit next to each other for whatever happenstance. And Miyu, kind of asks Sumire if she'd like to work for her. All the time, or all the while, Sumire is just suddenly hit by this coup de foudre, which in French kind of means love at first sight. She kind of becomes really enamored with Miyu. And then Sumire kind of goes questioning her sexuality. Oh no, am I lesbian? Am I not? I guess that kind of explains a lot of things. That's how she kind of says it. And she spends long hours kind of breaking everything down to her best friend, Kay. Now, Kay is this unassuming, kind of bland man whose first name we never know. But he's the narrator of the story, and he loves Sumire, like with a deep passion. He lusts after her. He loves her, like, really intensely, kind of the same way that Sumire loves Miyu, so it's the same kind of level. Except Sumire kind of keeps her love for Miyu secret for most of the book, from Miyu, and Kay does the same for Sumire. He can never really tell her how he feels, and it's a bit of a sad kind of situation for him. Stuff happens, he kind of just really is moseying along, and then when he just kind of thinks nothing of it when Sumire says, oh, I've been asked by Miyu to go overseas, we're kind of doing this trip together, and she goes to Greece, which is where the penultimate kind of moment, the clincher kind of happens in the book. And something happens to Sumire, which means that Miyu calls Kay desperate and kind of says, can you come to Greece? We're in a really remote island near Rhodes, and I'm in a pickle. And that's basically kind of how the story goes. So, yeah, there's something really unusual about Sputnik, Sweetheart, in that it kind of doesn't really feel like you're reading a Murakami, or it kind of doesn't. It's very unassuming. So, unassuming is the theme for today, actually, because his story is a bit bland. It feels tepid or tame, because Murakami usually writes about, you know, these themes. They're quite recurrent in his books, like societal taboos, violence, war, death is a huge one, like suicides, death by other means, like murders. But essentially, with the books that he's written, so like his very popular ones, like Kafka on the Shore, say, it really explores taboo love, taboo nature, societal taboo. Like, I'm going to say taboo a lot, but honestly, Kafka on the Shore really explores what it is to be different and what it is to feel lonely. Like, a lot of the works that Murakami loves to write is that he writes intuitively, and he writes that, we are all kind of floating along, moseying along, as it were, in our own little bubbles, and it just feels so alienating and so alone. But he does make magic out of the simple and out of the mundane. And there's a huge lyricism to his work. In its simplicity, he's a very unusual writer in that he writes very simply, and the lyricism comes from this sense of that it's chaotic, that it's violent, that it's wicked, but it's all very muted, and it looks beyond that. And if you're reading Murakami and you go, oh dear, like, I don't like the fact that his women are all very 2D. I don't like the fact that he writes about, cruelty to animals, where Johnny Walker and, say, Kafka on the Shore viscerally beheads cats. That's a very powerful moment in the story. And you might look at all of that, or the fact that you wind up Bird Chronicle people as skinned, or in, I'm trying to think what else, 1Q84, our mummy is a murderer, and she kills horrible men. And colourless Tsukuru Tazaki in his Years of Pilgrimage, there's also like this visceral kind of murder that happens, and rape. But if you kind of focus on that and you look beyond everything else and you kind of dismiss it all, you're kind of missing the point. In my opinion, you're missing the point of what he's actually trying to say. And he writes a whole world of beauty writ large, and the zaniness of life. Life can be crazy. Life can be so weird, and he kind of really is clued into that, I believe. There are things about Sputnik Sweetheart and about Murakami's work that are a little bit dated, but also he is an author of his time. Like, he began writing, in the 60s, 70s, and so he's kind of still in a way like in a time capsule. His work he's like encapsulated in that time when he writes, in my opinion. But in Sputnik Sweetheart, the male gaze on homosexuality is still there, so it is such a dated kind of aspect. But in a way, Murakami does deal with Sumire's queerness with a sensitivity. As someone who is, part of the LGBT space, as I am, I feel like he did it in a way well, and it's not the focus of the story, so that's good. He's not like slamming it into our faces, oh no, Sumire's a lesbian, God help us. No, definitely not. But there is still something to be said of the way that Sumire holds a modicum of masculinity, even with all her pretty dresses that she ends up wearing, and all the pretty shoes and the perfume and the makeup, the small amount of makeup that she wears. It's kind of very much, she still has a masculine side to her, which of course kind of, I guess, means Murakami might be projecting a masculinity into her to kind of make up for the fact that she and Miyu are two women in this relationship. Another point I'd like to kind of put forward is that, this book is translated. I don't know about you. I can't read Japanese, unfortunately. So I've never been able to read the source material at its source and understand it inherently. So translations, in a way, can be problematic because they can't, won't, or don't sometimes, they don't always tell us the truth behind the author's intentions, because sometimes it can be impossible. Even if you're an author translating your own work, sometimes it can be very difficult to stick to what it was, and staying faithful to the original and making something creative in its own right in another sense can be very tough, and sometimes that's impossible. So in a way, maybe it starts with us needing to be able to read the source material, but that's a whole other kettle of fish, honestly, which I'm not going to delve into because it's way too complicated for me and my little brain. All I'm going to say, though, is I'm so here for Murakami. I'm so here for his new works. I'm so here for his old works. And I love him for the deeper issues that he writes about. So, honestly, isn't the point of literature to escape? Yeah, I mean, when I work in my indie publishing industry, in the indie publishing industry, it's a bit of a whole interesting kind of specimen, because you see people of all creeds writing a book. Like, everyone thinks that they can be a writer, but not everyone is an author. And so you get a lot of people putting through unsolicited to the house that I work with manuscripts. that kind of represent how they feel and represent that they are in their own way creating something for themselves and that they feel is good. So no shade, honestly, to anyone that does submit their manuscript in for, for someone else to see. It's actually a really magical thing. It's a really wonderful thing, that people can get creative like this. Like, I can get creative like this with this podcast. Isn't this great? Like, that you can put forward something like this in a world where there's already a lot of it. Like, there's a lot of books out there, honestly. I'm not even going to be able to count them all. Even if you were to give me $1 billion and say count all the books in the world, there's too many, because there's also books that people have never published, or books that have been self-published, or books that are in people's heads and will never see the light of day. But I believe that the point of literature is escapism in a lot of ways. It kind of makes you put yourself in someone else's shoes for a while, which is why I absolutely love and endorse reading books from other cultures, even if they are translated into English or whatever language you happen to have as your primary dominant language. It feels so natural and so real to just put yourself in someone else's head and go, oh, this is what it's like. But also, it is a very inherently selfish act to want to write, because you're kind of creating something that's just for you, with your ego, and that's all that it is. But honestly, it's such a beautiful kind of thing, and I think we are all really here for it, clearly. Otherwise, the book industry would have not gone anywhere at this stage. And a lot of people would not be reading works that are seen in this time as problematic. Okay, so we'll move on. I'd love to talk more about this topic later, and I'm sure I will. But basically the themes in Sputnik Sweetheart and the nuances that I found interesting, they are that Murakami, I noticed in an article, and he was doing an interview, and it's on his website, about Sputnik Sweetheart, and he basically says that women in his novels are shamans or mystics, and they are a doorway to something other, which you can really see here. So, like, Sumire encountering Miyu kind of really spun her life around and around, and then she, without spoiling it, she did feel that if she couldn't have Miyu in the tangible, then maybe she'd need to have Miyu in the intangible. But yeah, so Murakami's central themes are generally alienation, or like tangible alienation. He loves music, Western music generally, like the Beatles, Western classical, Western romantic, Western Baroque, all that. He loves his Vivaldi, definitely, which is another, I guess that's Renaissance. I don't actually remember if Vivaldi is Baroque or any other time, but we'll see. I'll do my research later. So he also writes about war. He writes about death, about food, fashion, nature, sex, spirit, and the metaphysical. He loves magic. He loves cats. He definitely loves cats. Like, cats feature everywhere. And I was thinking to myself, there's no cats in Sputnik Sweetheart. And I read on, and sure enough, there were cats. So the themes that really sing in this book are those of spirit, music, magic, and even the food. Like, he writes about food. Murakami writes about food in a way that makes me want to eat it right now. The fish is fresh. It is zesty. It is spiritual almost, that he talks about food in such a way that just makes your mouth water. But it's simple. Like, he could be writing about making a miso soup and a mackerel for breakfast, or something like that, right? Like a traditional Japanese breakfast. He could be talking about that, and you would just smell it. You would feel the warmth of the miso soup, and you'd feel the fishy, beautiful brininess of the mackerel, and you would go, yum. Honestly, it's beautiful. But I think what this book kind of really seeks to explore thematically and overarchingly is the nature of love. That red thread that binds us, and that we need people as much as we hate them, as much as we kind of feel a bit gremlin-y, like, I've seen such a resurgence of gremlin mode, even on, like, Reddit. There's, like, Goblin Core subreddits, and I feel like since, we've had this past couple of years, we've had this resurgence of people just being more introverted because we don't really want to be around people anymore. But that's a shame, honestly, because people give life as much as they take. Your social battery winds down, but they do give life. They give a purpose. So that's what he kind of explores in this one. And overall, this Sputnik Sweetheart is a hidden gem. It is definitely not, in comparison with his bigger works, definitely not amazing, but I love it. I find the ending a little weak. I find that he didn't really explore it fully, and therefore you were left wanting at the end. But overall, so good. So good. I love Murakami. Okay, so I'm going to break down the favourite moments in my book. I'm not going to read the excerpts because, copyright. But basically, in the beginning, there's a scene where Kay talks to Sumire and kind of tries to encourage her with her writing and says something along the lines of, how did the ancient Chinese protect their cities? Something like that. And Sumire doesn't know, so Kay explains. He's like, well, basically, you would take, because there was lots of war, sites of battles in ancient China, that they would take the bones of the fallen Chinese soldiers, put them inside the walls, and then bless them with the blood of slaughtered dogs, to kind of make sure that they would then protect the city, and by sacrificing the dogs, they were then enacting a kind of spell to then bring to life the spirits of the soldiers. And that was a really beautiful part of the book, because not necessarily with the dog blood and the bone gates, but just the fact that it was so full of hope for the beginning it was in the beginning of the story, and it was so full of hope for what was to come. Sumire was still in her beatnik phase, not yet changed. And she's just such a character. Sumire is very much someone that I'd love to be myself. Like, she's so cool. I believe, in the beginning anyway. A second part of the book that I really enjoyed was the bit when Miyu is trapped in the Ferris wheel at the fair. Firstly, it's actually really funny that one of the shaman or the local fortune teller says, oh, mademoiselle, can you come here because your future's about to change? She ignores the fortune teller going, yeah, whatever. But then she ends up in the Ferris wheel, trapped. I won't go too much into it, but basically her life changes, and it's a very defining moment in the book. She essentially just almost dies, and it explains a lot. It explains a lot about her attitude and a lot about the way that she feels, about Sumire, about everything. And it's, as much as it's a scary part of the book, like, you feel a bit scared, you feel for Miyu. It's kind of really defining. A final part of the book that I love is when Kay arrives in Greece. Like, he's hungry. He's so hungry because he's flown all the way around the world. Well, maybe not all the way, but quite a while away. 10 hours maybe. But he just kind of feels like this visceral hunger when he gets to Greece. And then he eats, and the food just seems so tasty, and I want to go to Greece right now and eat the food. Essentially, it's just, one of my favorite parts is when Murakami starts talking about food, because he does it in such a way that, brings the plate into your life, and you can eat right then and there. Now, I'm going to try to do this every episode, but this next bit is going to be where I take a moment to kind of give thanks to the author that I've chosen for the episode and for their contribution to the world of literature. So, this might seem a little bit gratuitous, but I'll have you indulge me, and if you've made it this far, then it's certainly, I'm certainly thankful to you as well for taking the time to listen today. But I will finish with a letter to the author of the book and thank them for their contribution. Let me begin. Dear Haruki Murakami, I don't know where to start. So, frankly, I've been dreading this a bit because it's such a big deal for me, because I love you so much. First of all, I'll just simply say that I'm thankful. Thankful that your work has been so vast, so gentle, and so needed. I don't recall how I found you. I don't recall how I picked up your first book or what indeed that first book was, but I feel like I have always known you. You and your words have lifted me up in times of sadness, anger, and happiness. And I have depended on you when I was lost, and I found my way home with your encouragement and funny stories. Not to mention, least of all, the food. It's like you were the best friend I needed at the time I most needed a friend. And I will always remember the time I bored the tits off my doctor by reading segments of your words to try and make him understand how lonely I felt and how bereft I was. But despite everything and how my life has turned out, I will always love your words. And that's all that matters. I wish only happiness for you, and I hope you continue to bless the world with your stories. So thank you. With an ever-loving heart, Nahima. So today we've kind of just gone through the story of Sputnik Sweetheart, written by Haruki Murakami and translated by Philip Gabriel. We've gone through the themes, we've gone through the food, we've gone through the fashion, and apparently Murakami is a secret shopper. He loves his shopping, so no wonder he writes about fashion in such a way that he does. But if you enjoyed today's episode, send us an email at doublemoonletters@gmail.com or leave a rating. It would be greatly appreciated. What will we talk about next time? So next time I'm looking to really bring to the table a work that I actually helped publish. It is the first book that I helped publish, and even though, it's always a team that kind of is behind the work of an author, unless they self-publish entirely by themselves, this one's a really special moment for me, and I really look forward to sharing it with you all. So that's it for me this episode, listeners. I do hope you've enjoyed my contribution to the world of lit podcasting. Until we read again, stay safe out there, wherever you might find yourself. Cue the music.